Dio del ciel, se fossi una colomba, vorrei volar laggiù dove il mio amor, che inginocchiata San Giusto prega con l'animo mesto, fa che il mio amore torni, ma torni presto. Vola colomba bianca, vola, diglielo tu, che tornerò, dille che non sarà più sola, e che mai più la lascerò. Amici uniti e gialli,
I was sick, but I was born because I was feeling good.
Didn't we? No, we had a lovely time. It's a beautiful, it reminded me of where my family's from in Greece. Very, very similar. In fact, Castellorizo, where my family's from, is Castello Rosso, and the architecture is Italian because when a lot of the buildings were done was under the Italian rule. My mum, when she travelled to Perth in 1933, travelled on an Italian passport. She was only 7. She did 2 years at school in Greece, but the 2 years that she was there, she learned Italian because it was under Italian rule. Needless to say, we fixed that up after a little while. But no, it was magnificent. Magnificent. It was a beautiful trip.
How long were you away?
It was a 6-day trip, 4 nights in Rome. So direct flight is 1 day, 4 nights, direct flight coming back. But I will say that on the Dreamliner, that's the plane now, different oxygen, different type of plane, and it feels like an easier flight. Everybody slept for about 5 or 6 hours on the way there. You leave at 10:30 at night, you arrive 8:30 in the morning, you're fresh. Fresh. It was very worthwhile.
Something to look forward to.
Definitely. Well, exactly.
The pizza man.
Beautiful.
Pizza man.
Beautiful.
Prima l'operatore. Ciao Frank.
Ciao, buongiorno. Ciao Franco, quando ti posso vedere?
Turo, and I will be directing this morning's proceedings. Before we commence, could I kindly ask that you turn your phones to silent for the next 20 minutes or so? Thank you. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Welcome to the commemoration of the Day of the Sacrifice of Italian Labour in the world. The anniversary was established in 2001 by the then Italian Parliament upon proposal of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in order to remember 136 Italian miners who sadly lost their lives on this day, 8th of August 1956, at the Bois de Casier coal mine in Marcinelle, Belgium. Over the years, it has become a special occasion not only to mourn all the Italians who have died while working abroad, but also to celebrate both the pioneers of Italian immigration and new immigrants. We are glad to warmly welcome our distinguished guests, the Honourable Dr. Tony Buti, MLA, Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Interests, the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of the City of Perth, Mr. Basil Zempilas, the Consul of Italy in Perth, Dr. Nicolo Costantini, the President of Com.It.Es of Italians in Western Australia, Mr. Francesco Abbonizio, Commander Tony Feeney, and all the presidents of Italian clubs and associations. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a really warm welcome. To start with the official part of the ceremony, I now would like to invite you to listen to the national anthems of Italy and Australia. Could you please be upstanding? Thank you. I now invite Minister Buti, the Lord Mayor, the Consul and the President of Com.It.Es to lay their wreaths, after which we will observe 1 minute silence.
gentlemen.
I would now like to invite the President of the Com.It.Es, Mr. Francesco Abbonizio, to deliver his speech, please.
Thank you, Enrico. Ladies and gentlemen, buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti. Fino a questa mattina ci preoccupavamo, let's go in English. Until this morning we were worried about the weather and we've been pestering our consul for plan B, and the consul has been assuring me that the weather will be nice. Evidently, I always say to people when they ask me difficult questions, I say that I got everything under control because I speak to my good friend Francesco, the Pope. Our consul must have somebody higher up to organize such a beautiful day. Okay, I would like to welcome the Italian Consul, Dr. Nicolo Costantini, Dr. Tony Buti, Minister of OMI, His Excellency Lord Mayor Basil Zempilas, our distinguished guests, our members of the Com.It.Es in WA, all the presidents and the associations that come here today, and of course every single one of you that made over here to this beautiful place. I also would like to acknowledge the Noongar people, the original custodian of this very land that we're standing on, and also the city of Perth that has allowed, through the sister relationship with our vast city, to have this monument representing the Italian community here in Western Australia, representing the migrants. And we are, as the Italian community, we are very, very fortunate to have this beautiful such monument erected here, and as I mentioned, with the leadership of representative from the vast city. We're here today to commemorate la Giornata del Sacrificio del Lavoro Italiano nel Mondo. Translated, the sacrifice, the National Day of the sacrifice of the workers and the migrants in the world, in the workforce. As you all know, this day was directed to be celebrated on this day in 2001 by the then President of the Repubblica Italiana, and the day was supposed to be, or it is, the 8th of August, which is tomorrow. We're doing today because today is Sunday. Why the 8th of August? The 8th of August, like it's already been mentioned, in 1956 in Belgium, there was a mining accident, and there were 200 and I lost my notes, 236, I think. 262 lives that lost their life in this mining accident. Of these 262, 136 they were Italian miners. Today, with the Com.It.Es, we decided to take the connection to this commemoration to another mine accident or incident that happened in 1907 in Kalgoorlie. In this incident, it was a gentleman or a miner, Italian, by the name of Modesto Varischetti, The lady from the Com.It.Es, they organized a photographic exhibition that's just behind you, that later on all of you can enjoy it, and more will be talked about it. So, I would like all of you, first of all, I'd like to thank the ladies of the Com.It.Es. They have organized this photographic exhibition and to put together. And I'd like to thank all the clubs and associations for bringing drinks and refreshment to share all around with us today. And their support, and the support of all of you. I'll pass the word to our Consul Nicolo Costantini. Thank you.
Buongiorno, grazie Frank, buongiorno a tutti. First of all, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Secondly, I'd like to thank the City of Perth for allowing us to organize such a meaningful ceremony in such a beautiful venue. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Grazie also to Minister Buti, not only for his most appreciated presence today, but also for the ongoing support towards the Italian community by the state government and by himself. Grazie alle associazioni e ai club that are present today and that generously contributed to the organization of the event. And last but not least, thank you to Com.It.Es and its president Francesco Abbonizio for successfully partnering together with the consulate on this occasion. And actually, as you said, we should also thank the weather for this break of rain. And Frank and I have been dancing the entire week to have a bit of sun today. Ladies and gentlemen, as it has been recalled, 66 years ago, 262 miners, of which 136 were Italians from Abruzzo, Friuli, Puglia, Marche, Molise and Sicily, lost their lives in the tragedy of Marcinelle in Belgium. In 2001, the Italian Prime Minister's office, upon the proposal of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, decided to proclaim the anniversary as National Day commemorating Italian workers around the world. So since then, every year, our heartfelt thoughts go to all the Italians who have died while working abroad, and we devote this day to honor their memory. Tragedies like the one occurred in Marcinelle make us reflect on two fundamental issues. On the one hand, the importance of labor from its human and social perspective, and on the other hand, the impact of migration on the countries of origin and also on the countries of destination. Indeed, over the decades, migration has enabled the coming together of peoples, cultures, trades and nations through courage, ingenuousness and sacrifice. In fact, the history of Italian emigrants is the story of men and women who were looking for a better future and the opportunity to support the relaunch of our country after the devastation of the Second World War. Looking at these two elements, after 66 years, we can say that working conditions have improved dramatically thanks to the commitment of all the institutions and the civil society. Moreover, nowadays, Italian migrants can easily take a direct flight rather than embarking themselves on long and perilous trips by boat. And we also know that Italians significantly contributed to and even gave their lives to build Western Australia and develop it in a wide range of sectors. The presence today of the most important Italian associations and clubs in Perth is a testimony to the rich history of our community, to the sacrifice and to the determination of many Italians who left our fatherland and were given a new opportunity by WA. Every day they help spreading the best possible image of our country, and they are a vital component of it. That is why there was no better venue to organize today's ceremony. A monument erected to remember the migrants from Vasto and to celebrate the relationship between Vasto and Perth. If we think carefully to the sacrifice of those migrants, and actually not only the migrants from Vasto, but more broadly to all Italian migrants, if we think carefully to the friendship between our two countries they have all nurtured, including yourselves, well, only then we can really understand the deep meaning of today's commemoration and the extraordinary value of the Italian community in Perth. Let me conclude by recalling that in 1967, at the end of his state visit to Australia, the President of the Italian Republic, Giuseppe Saragat, recalled with great appreciation the interactions he had during his trip with the Italian community down under, and he declared, and I quote him, "Around us, we felt a movement of affection for the ancient fatherland. That is something perfectly matching with the affection for the new fatherland. Everywhere, our emigrants taught us that patriotism can live everlasting and splendid, not as selfishness, but as a beneficial component of a civilization that is able to merge with others, helping raise them and make them more human." End of quote. So I think that these words are still valid and they perfectly describe our wonderful community in Western Australia. So, cari connazionali, stringiamoci quindi insieme oggi per commemorare e celebrare tutti gli italiani emigrati all'estero e con spirito di coesione procediamo verso il futuro, grati per tutto quello che hanno fatto coloro che sono venuti prima di voi e animati sempre dall'orgoglio di essere italiani. Grazie.
Dr. Tony Buti, MLA, Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Interests, to deliver his speech.
Thank you, Enrico. Buongiorno a tutti. It's fantastic to be here on this very special day. And could I commence by acknowledging that we are standing on Whadjuk country and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Can I also acknowledge our special guest, the Consul General, or the Consul of Italy in Perth, Nicolo Costantini, and the Chair of the Committee of Italians in West Australia, Mr. Francesco Abbonizio, the Honourable Lord Mayor of the City of Perth, Basil Zempilas, and all the presidents of the Italian clubs and associations in Western Australia. As has been mentioned, while we are celebrating today, it's really a remembrance for the commemoration of the day of the sacrifice of the Italian labour in the world that bore out of a disaster back in Belgium in 1956 when 136 Italians lost their lives. And Italians, as you very well know, have been instrumental around the world in building new communities and new cities and new towns. And here in Western Australia, we have people of Italian ancestry who, and also many native-born Italians, who set up the construction industry in Western Australia and the development of Perth and the wider community. And Mr. Finney is one of those gentlemen who I believe is a living treasure of Western Australia. So, where are you, Mr. Finney? Thank you for all that you've done for Western Australia. But we are quite, it's interesting in Western Australia because we have Italians that have been champions of industry, as Mr. Finney, but we had many Italians that have worked as labourers and have done the hard work in Perth and in the regions. And one of those is my father, my late father, who came to Australia in 1951 from the Tuscany region, and he came by ship, and he started working in Dwellingup and then down in Collie. And then he worked in the northwest before there was such thing as FIFO. So when you went up to the northwest in those days, you went away for a year, not flying in 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, and living in pretty basic conditions. But he also was involved in the building of the Hyatt Hotel, which is just behind us. And back in 1983, he had an accident and he lost half a finger. And he had another accident another time where he was very lucky not to lose part of his face. And he died at a relatively young age of 77 76 years of age, or 77 I think, and it was due to scarring on the lungs. The doctors were never really sure why, but they put it down to probably all the dust and other particles that he would have inhaled during his working life as a labourer on many building sites in Perth and also in the northwest. So today has a particular personal significance to myself, and as the Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Interests in the McGowan government, I go to many events, like I was with the Lord Mayor last night at a fantastic event put on by the Indian community. And the Indian community of today are basically the Italian community of the 1950s, where the Italians of the 1950s were one of the major immigrants to Western Australia. Now it's the Indian community. So I go to many different events and they're fantastic, and last night was no different. But I'll just let you into a little bit of a secret. Don't tell anyone. I particularly like going to events of Italian nature. It's just a personal thing there. So today is particularly important for me and important for the Italian community. Thank you for all you've done here, and the Consul, it's been fantastic working with you in the time that I've been the Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Interests, because you take your job incredibly seriously and you connect with the Italian community and also with the WA government. So thank you for all your efforts, and may you remain as our Consul here for a long period of time, well, at least while I'm the Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Interests. Thank you for everyone. Do remember this is an incredibly important day where we remember the sacrifice back in 1956, but also the sweat and tears of many Italians throughout the world and also in Perth, Western Australia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for those very kind words. I now would like to invite the Right Honourable, the Lord Mayor of the City of Perth, Mr. Basil Zempilas, to deliver his speech.
It's a great pleasure to be here today, right in the heart of the City of Perth. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Whadjuk Noongar people of Western Australia, and I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. What a special day this is, and how magnificent it is to see so many members of the Italian community together right in the heart of the City of Perth. I'll be sure to be onto our ground staff on Monday morning at about 8 o'clock to make sure that excess water is mopped up. However, not forgetting and not being too bogged down by the water. What a beautiful monument this is, and what a beautiful day it is for everything that it represents. Can I acknowledge the President, the Consul, the Minister, to all of the various presidents and members and committee members of the various Italian associations. Thank you very much for being here, and importantly, thank you for everything you do to enrich the Western Australian community. I know we are here today to acknowledge the day of sacrifice of Italian labour in the world, and I think it's been well acknowledged by our previous speakers, but also well acknowledged that today doubles as a celebration to honour those who have come from the other part of the world, the Italian migrants who've made such a strong contribution to the land that we now call home. And when I look up at the memorial and am reminded of that journey, a journey that my ancestors made also from a small Greek island by the name of Castellorizo, which, as it turns out, when my mum immigrated from in 1933, was under Italian rule. Castellorizo, as the Greeks call it, is actually taken from what the Italians called the place that they were inhabiting at the time. Castello, castle on the end. Rosso, when the sun would go down, it would shine on the castle, and it became a red castle, and they called it Castello Rosso. And from there, the Greeks started to call it Castellorizo, and it's a place where my family are from. But when I look up at that scene, I'm reminded of the journey that many of you made, many of your parents or grandparents made, many of our forefathers made, and they had a difficult decision at the time to leave the place of their birth for a better life and for the opportunity that Perth and Western Australia, and indeed Australia, offered them. I say with such pride and such joy how lucky we all were. Unlike the direct flight to Rome, which I was lucky enough to be on just a month or so ago, which took 16 hours, how lucky we all were that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, or indeed some of you here, chose to get off the boat at Fremantle. Could have gone on to Adelaide. Well, no one would have gone to Adelaide. Could have gone to Melbourne. Could have gone to Sydney, but got off the boat here in Fremantle. And as a result, that proudly makes us Perth people, or Fremantle people, or Western Australians. And the luckiest thing I often say, for me, in my lifetime, has been the connection to where my family is from originally, Greece obviously, but also how lucky we were that they chose Perth to be our new home. And as a result, the wonderful opportunities that we have here. So I think it's very important that we acknowledge those who have made that difficult journey. They gave us the opportunity that we now enjoy. And as I said to the Indian community with the minister last night, and as I say at every citizenship ceremony where I'm lucky enough to be the presiding officer over, where people just like us have had the opportunity to move to a new country and now get the joy of becoming Australian citizens, by all means celebrate all of the great things that it means to be Australian. But never ever forget where it is that we have come from. Never forget the great customs and traditions, our language, our heritage, the great things that it means to be Italian, to be Greek, to be whatever it means where you came from. Because Perth truly is a multicultural community. It is what makes Perth one of the great places in the world to live. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you, your ancestors and your forefathers also, for the great contribution they have made to building the city of Perth. It's the beautiful place that it is because everybody that arrived here decided we're going to make the most of our new home. And what a contribution the Italians have made. You should be very proud of that contribution, and we should all be very thankful for it. As you know, I did have the opportunity to travel to Rome. I was delighted to be able to go with my wife, Amy. We met the Mayor of Rome, Mayor Gualtieri. We also had a wonderful day in our sister city of Vasto, and to be able to honour all of you by keeping that sister city relationship alive, which is now 33 years old, is the least that we can do. Because as we know, the Italian people have been enormous contributors to the lifestyle that we all live here in Perth. I'm very grateful for your support always. I'm very fond of the shared community spirit that we have. Una razza, una fazza. The Greeks and the Italians are not very dissimilar. And it gives me great pride to be Lord Mayor of the City of Perth, such a beautiful and forward-thinking multicultural place that is built on old-fashioned hard work and ideals, but a sense of moving forward together. So again, can I say thank you for all that you've done for our community. Thank you for being here today. And thank you to those who have come before us, those that lost their lives, and those like that family depicted up there, who did the hard yards on the boat for 3 months to come to a new place to give all of us the wonderful opportunities that we now enjoy. How lucky we are. Thank you everybody and have a wonderful day.
What a heartfelt speech. Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, the tragedy that occurred in Marcinelle in 1956 was not the only one in history claiming lives of brave miners. And as we've heard before by the President of Com.It.Es, a similar event already happened in 1907 in our very own Kalgoorlie, where the Italian miner Modesto Varischetti found himself trapped in a gold mine for 9 days. You can find out more about his story through the exhibition under the...
My name's Suzanna Giuliano, and I'm the child of Italian migrants who came to Australia in the 1950s from Molise. And it's interesting that you talk about the mine disaster. My dad, one of his first jobs was in a coal mine in Belgium, and I think he decided to come to Western Australia because of the mine disaster and to sort of turn his back on mining. More than a decade ago, I wrote a book together with a bunch of researchers at the University of Western Australia, including Professor Loretta Baldassar, called Vita Italiana, about the history of Italian migrants in Western Australia. And it's the stories of all Italian migrants that came to Western Australia and sacrificed so much to leave their homes and to work far from home. Italian migrants of that earlier era and past eras often worked in difficult jobs, labouring in heavy, manual, dangerous jobs, far from hospitals, far from assistance, and accidents and health and safety issues were kind of very common, as Minister Buti kind of alluded to with his own father. Mining was and is notorious an industry for accidents, and Modesto Varischetti, who we'll learn more about today through the exhibition, was at the centre of one of the most notorious mining accidents in 1907 in Western Australia. Modesto, his nickname was Charlie, was born in Gorno, near Bergamo in Lombardia in 1874. Gorno was and is a region of zinc mines in the Riso Valley, and generations of people, local people, worked in these mines. Modesto began work at the age of 13. He married a local woman and had 5 children before deciding to migrate in 1900 to Australia, going first to Victoria. So many miners from the Valtellina region were willing to travel large distances, long distances, to earn money to provide for their families, and Varischetti was one of these, one of the many hundreds of men attracted to different places around the world. First he came to Australia in 1900, working in Victoria, and then he came with his brothers to Western Australia in the early 1900s to a gold mine near Bonneville near Coolgardie. He and his 2 brothers worked in the harsh red desert, a complete world away from the beautiful rolling green hills of Gorno. The monument you see behind us, which shows the Italian migrant family, wasn't the reality for most people, including Modesto, who didn't migrate with his whole family. He came alone with his brothers, leaving behind a wife and 5 children. He went back to visit his wife and children in 1903, not knowing that it was the last time that he would see his wife, who died in 1905. Modesto went back in 1905 to resettle his children with family and to try and provide homes for them before coming to us back to Western Australia in 1906. And little did he know that a year later this terrible fate would await him in Bonneville. On 19th of March 1907, after a storm caused flash flooding in the Westralia mine, Modesto became trapped deep underground, hundreds of metres underground, in the mine, surviving only by retreating to an air pocket. He was pretty much given up for dead, except for the fact that he would tap a special Bergamasco miner's code, and people knew he was alive on the surface through this tapping. The mine, which was under the leadership of Herbert Hoover, who became the 31st American president, sprung into action to save him, and they began pumping water, but realised very quickly that they wouldn't be able to pump the water out enough to save his life. So they turned to different ideas of how to rescue Modesto. They engaged divers and special equipment that was put on a train that was raced from Fremantle to Coolgardie in record time, and that record for the sort of rail journey lasted for decades. And they reached Coolgardie and were able to pump water, send divers down with letters and food to comfort and keep him alive after about 6 days. And then by the 9th day, the water level had subsided to the point where he was able to be reached by the divers and walked out. Once he was brought back to the surface, by his rescuers, Frank Hughes and Thomas Hurd, he was acclaimed a hero along with the rescuers. And his story kind of captivated not just Western Australia or Australia, the whole world. It became world headlines all around the world. The newspapers heavily praised the bravery of the heroic rescuers, Frank Hughes and Thomas Hearn, and Australians all around patted themselves on the back for sparing no expense for his rescue, at a time when, in 1907, Italian workers, particularly in the mines, were not very well regarded. They were seen as undercutting Australian labour, so it was a difficult time. And there was all sorts of debate in the newspapers about whether it was worth putting so much effort into rescuing this Italian down a mine. But surviving 9 days, Varischetti's courage and fortitude helped dispel some of the negative ideas and stereotypes that Australians had about Italians of that time. And so, today we have an editor of the West Australian who has got an Italian surname, who's of Italian background, but back in 1907, John Winthrop Hackett, the editor of the West Australian, this is what he said about the mine rescue in Varischetti. In truly terrifying circumstances, the victim demonstrated a strength of spirit which gives honour to the Italian race. Italians are considered weak and less courageous than Nordic races. However, the disaster at Bonneville has shown that, when put to the test, the Italian of today is not weak. He can show fortitude and strength of character, which would do the most courageous Romans or British proud. Because of Varischetti, all of his fellow countrymen have acquired even greater esteem among Australians. So it was a really sort of powerful public event for Italians in Australia and for Australians coming to terms with Italians in their midst. In 1907, Varischetti cheated death, and he was briefly feted and celebrated, and then he went back to work. He went back to work in the gold mines of Kalgoorlie. And the story that's not so much told is that 13 years later, he died of pulmonary fibrosis in 1920 at the age of 46. The sad reality is that diseases like fibrosis and silicosis and a whole range of other mining diseases are far more common killers of Italian miners than mine tragedies like the fate that befell him almost in 1907. So how can we look back on this event and what can we take from it? So many West Australians and Italians even of different generations have reflected back on the Varischetti tragedy in different ways. In his book Lo sguardo e la memoria, local writer Alfredo Strano recorded a conversation that he'd had with the UWA professor Francesco Vanzetti, who wrote, "L'eroismo di Hughes e i nobili sentimenti del popolo per Varischetti, che nella circostanza rivelò agli australiani la tempra del lavoratore italiano, generano in me un profondo sentimento di ammirazione per il popolo australiano." So it brought Italians together with Australians in terms of feeling esteemed. From the other end, I was recently at an event where Matt Trinker, who's the head of the National Museum, who was a descendant of Italians who grew up in Pickering Brook, was talking about the Varischetti story and how he learnt it as a boy in school and how it brought him pride to think of how strong this man was to withstand all of this and to sort of continue on with his life afterwards. And so it gave in him a respect for migrants as well. Kids in Western Australia are taught the history through the WA Museum and through all different kinds of ways they're taught the story of the mine rescue. In the early 2000s, a documentary was made called My Name is Charlie in Italy, and the children even in Gorno in Italy are taught this story. I think Com.It.Es themselves have done a fantastic job of keeping this story alive. In 2007, for the 100th anniversary of the mine rescue, the Com.It.Es and a delegation that came out from Gorno went to Kalgoorlie and had a special kind of commemorative celebration of that to kind of mark the event. And I think it's worth just finishing up, reflecting a little bit about what the story means and how it resonates with us today. And for me, it's all of those things. The story about how Italians were viewed and treated in 1907 is part of that story. The story of courage and fortitude for this man who withstood this terrible incident is hugely important. But to me, the story is really about the sacrifice that he made for family. We don't know what happened to the 5 children that he left behind in Gorno and the separation of that family. But that's a huge part of that story that's missing. And for me, that's really kind of a key thing that potentially resonates most with people today. As the consular has spoken about today, we have recent Italian migrants who it's so easy and quick to go backwards and forwards to Italy. Technology has meant that we can keep in touch with people, and so migrants today face different kinds of challenges. But the thing that they have in common with Varischetti from all those years ago is the sacrifices that they make for family and that disconnection from family. And so the fact that he died 13 years after this terrible tragedy in the mine, away from his family, away from his children, is something I think that even migrants of today will have some sort of resonance with. So if we look at the statue, and we look at that lovely, marvellous statue that was made to commemorate Italian migrants in Australia, what we see is not so much the reality of family unity, because migration pulls families apart, but it's the ideal of that family and the importance of family that pushes, that gives people the courage and the need to migrate in the first place, that unites current Italian migrants with past ones like Modesto and helps them withstand all sorts of trials and tribulations, whether it be in the bottom of a mine, whether it be dislocation from family. So I think that's the story that I'd like to take away from today's commemoration of Varischetti. So thank you. Please enjoy the exhibition, and thanks to Com.It.Es for putting it on and for inviting us and for having an opportunity to reflect on such a beautiful day as today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Certainly an education, your story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. We now invite you to explore the exhibition and enjoy the delicious food and drinks graciously and generously offered by the following associations: Abruzzo e Molise Sporting Club, Associazione dei Marchigiani, Associazione Nazionale Carabinieri, Tuscany Association WA, WAMA, Mr. Salvatore Riggio, and the consulate. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, but I'm going to go and have something to eat. On the way back.
Oh, no, I just want Louis. Oh, I'll take my
Una pizza di ma hai capito? Hai capito? Una pizza sulla strada.